Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda, if we have not met before, and I am an ordinand here, so I'm training to be a vicar. And I'm continuing our series this morning of Christian habits. But before we do that, I want to take you back on a stroll. And if you will, go on an imagination tour with me through the African plains. And along come Timon and Pumbaa. And they begin to serenade you saying, Hakuna Matata. What a wonderful phrase. Hakuna Matata ain't no passing craze. It means no worries for the rest of your days. It's a problem-free philosophy. Hakuna Matata. Thank you. I will not be leading worship next week. But the principle that governed Timon and Pumbaa was Hakuna Matata. And this morning, I want to talk about this habit of Sabbath. And Sabbath, it is a principle of the Christian life, one that can govern us in the way that Hakuna Matata did. It is fundamental, it is basic, and it is core. So what is Sabbath all about? Well, number one, Sabbath is fundamentally all about rest. Are you tired? Are you tired of being tired? And there's going to be a photo that comes up, which is my least favourite advert on the tube. And there's even an acronym for this. It's called TATT, tired all of the time. And it's not surprising, is it? You know, we live these kind of 24/7 lives. We live disjointed lives. We're hyper-connected, but highly individualistic. And I think what that creates is this kind of peak saturation where you're taking in information all of the time. But at the same time, there's loneliness. And there's this inability to switch off. And you know that's true when you sleep, but you wake up and you still feel tired or weary. Because sleep and rest, they are not the same thing. And did you know that 17% of people who die on Mount Everest die on the way up, but 53% of people die on the way down? And I think it shows that our culture, we are obsessed with achievement, with climbing pinnacles, climbing your Everest. And what that produces is high-achieving, high-producing individuals who end up chronically tired and burnt out. And you know, what we need is a faith that will sustain us going up the mountain, but also coming back down into the valleys. And what I want to talk about is rest as a rhythm. Rest as an antidote to this kind of quick fix society. And I think we all know that we are more productive when we take a break. If you think about making bread, you knead it, you work the dough, and then you let it rest. And it's in that resting that the yeast activates and the oxygen rises and the bread is formed. And what endless lockdowns has destroyed, but what the Bible gives, what we see in this passage, is a rhythm for work and for rest. You know, it says, verse 13, 6 days you shall labour and do all of your work, but on the seventh day take a Sabbath. And not just you, but your whole household take a day off so that you can rest. And verse 12, it says, observe the Sabbath by keeping it holy. And this word holy, it means to consecrate. It means to set apart, making it special. And there's something here about setting in margins, isn't there? About putting hedges around this principle of Sabbath, because we need rest. And do you remember the first Sabbath, right back in Genesis, the story of God creating the whole world in 6 days, and on the seventh day, God rested. And in the original Ten Commandments, it says that God blessed the Sabbath day, and he made it holy. He made it special. The creator of the whole universe consecrated a day for us just to satisfy that need that we have for rest. So there's this physical aspect to rest of not working, but I think there's also this deep spiritual aspect to rest. What does the psalmist say? But find rest, my soul, in God alone. And I want to suggest that rest, it is found in relationship with God. It's part of his character. It's who he is. Think back to the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve walking with God in the cool of the day. Not working, not striving, not serving, just being with God. Because this principle of Sabbath rest, it is found in God. God who gave us the Sabbath, who made the Sabbath for us, because Sabbath is a reflection of who God is. On the seventh day, God rested. And this passage in Deuteronomy, it is all about God. Did you notice that the word Sabbath only crops up 3 times, but the word Lord or God came up 8 times? It's a sure sign that the focus, it is all about God. And in this passage, Moses is basically giving a sermon to the Israelites, and he's going over again what God has already said in the 10 Commandments. And the crux of this passage, it was in verse 15. It says, remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath. Remember what God has done. God has done everything for us. He has already made a way for us. He created the Sabbath for us. This is the God who always goes ahead of us. And what do you see when you look at God? I see Jesus on a cross, that same picture that's behind us there, leading us out of slavery to sin and to death, and making a way for us to come back to communion with the Father, back to life in him. And as the people of God, we reflect who God is in us. It's his life in us. And I wonder what people see when they look at the people of God. Because one of the ugliest things in the Christian life is Christian burnout. And I know because I've been there. In my early 20s, I spent nearly 4 years in Southeast Asia working with vulnerable teenagers. And it was often, to be honest, just completely overwhelming with the sheer level of need. And I threw my everything at it because obviously I'm going to save the world on my own. And I did it in my own strength. And what happened was I ended up exhausted, like physically, spiritually, and emotionally, just completely worn out. And it kind of makes you weary and cynical about church if you get into that mindset. And when I came back to the UK, the last thing I ever thought would happen would be that I would work at a church again. But here I am, because we worship a God who is a God of miracles and of rest. But the sad thing is, when Christian leaders talk about burnout, it is always retrospectively and nearly never preemptive. Because we're very good at working for God. But the Sabbath, it was made by God as a gift. And what that tells me about God is that he is fundamentally about grace, that his character is love, that he wants not stressed out, burned out, worn out, miserable followers, but sons and daughters who radiate joy as they follow what he has made for them to do, the good purposes that he has made for us on eagle's wings. Because if Sabbath is a reflection of who God is, and he made it for us, then we are worshipping at the altar of grace and not of works. And I'm not saying that we won't get tired or that it will be easy all the time. I am saying take a day off. And this resting in God, it is reminding yourself of who you are in him. being renewed and being refreshed in his image because it reflects who God is. And it's so important because we become what we worship. You know, if you worship at the altar of work, you will become a workaholic. If you worship at the altar of works, you will become a legalist. But if you worship Jesus Christ, you will be set free. And Jesus, he is the fountain of life. He is the giver of grace. And in a society where resting can be seen as a sign of weakness, how are we becoming people of grace? Because ultimately, Sabbath is about worship. And as we offer our lives to God, entering into his rhythms and his principles, our lives are an offering of worship. This passage in Deuteronomy with Moses going over the 10 Commandments, I wonder if you remember what they were. So 1, I am the Lord your God. Worship no one besides me. 2, do not make any idols. 3, do not misuse my name. And here, 4, keep the Sabbath. All 4 of these commandments, they are about idolatry or about worship. Worship no one but me. Don't worship at the altar of works or of relationships or of building the perfect home or having the best social media feed, whatever it is. God, he is jealous for our worship. It's that important to him. And he knows that the week is going to be full of busyness, maybe full of hardship or grief. Hopefully some fun and games, probably too much caffeine if you're anything like me, potentially too much red wine, but definitely physical tiredness or worldly temptation and spiritual distraction. So put a margin in your life to enable you to come back to the author of life. And I've just started reading this book by a guy called Eugene Peterson, who wrote the Message version of the Bible, if you've ever come across that. And it's called A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. And he says something in the beginning which I found really fascinating. He writes about the difficulty of discipleship in this quick fix society. And he says that people submerged in a culture swarming with lies and malice feel as if they are drowning in it. But such dissatisfaction with the world as it is preparation for traveling in the way of Christian discipleship. And then it goes on, a person has to be thoroughly disgusted with the way things are to find the motivation to set out on the Christian way. And this passage in Deuteronomy, it took place in a desert, in a dry place, in the wilderness years where you're stretched, where you're tired, where you're thirsty. And it's the times in my life when I have felt really dry that I have learned to really rely on God, that I've learned what grace is all about. And if you feel like you're in a bit of a desert right now, then this is good news for you. You were made for more. And it's when we get fed up with this unrestful society, this ungrace culture, that we begin to really hunger for those rhythms of grace. And sometimes God, in his grace, he notices when we're not focused on him. And in his mercy for our hard hearts, in his jealous pursuit of our worship, he will allow us to travel into that desert place so that we learn again to reset our lives around him. This is the God who led his people out of Egypt into the desert so that they would learn how to worship him. And keeping the Sabbath is this practice of worship and dependence on God, who has done everything possible to meet with us. This rhythm of rest, it is about worshipping God. So my one big disclaimer in all of this is that I am totally preaching this sermon for myself because I still find this really hard. And, I work on a Sunday. That means I have to get up really early and James is still in bed. And then, Monday to Friday, he's working. And the only day off we have together is Saturday. And at the moment, it just feels like we're catching up on life admin all of the time. And you know that you're newly married when you have to kind of plan which day of the week you're going to wash the sheets on. But, some of us here will work shift jobs. And you throw small children into the mix, and I have absolutely no idea how you do it. And I'm not going to tell you how to do Sabbath, because I wouldn't have a leg to stand on. But I am going to say we need a rhythm of rest in our lives and to think practically about it. So just to end with some really practical tips about Sabbath. So idea number 1, I like to think of building habits as a 3-stage process of discipline, desire, and delight. And it starts as a discipline, so it's something you have to kind of remind yourself to do. But then you move on to this stage of desire where actually you want to do it because you know that it's life-giving. And then finally becomes a delight, something that you cherish and hold on to because it gives you such life. And the last thing I would want is for anyone to go away from this thinking Sabbath is like another thing that I have to do to live the Christian life. This is a delight. It's for our good, and God gave it to us as a gift. And the next point is to be vigilant. So the Hebrew word for keep in our passage, or observe, is also the same word that means to guard or to protect. And I guarantee you that your Sabbath time will be spiritually contested the moment you decide to make the decision, while you're even thinking about making the decision. Someone will ring you up with a really, really lovely idea to go on this really fun day out, which is going to be completely exhausting, and take you away from that time that you actually need to spend with your spouse. Or someone will ring you up and invite you to the anniversary tour concert of your favourite rock band. And it is a truth, universally acknowledged, that the moment you sit down with your Bible to read it or to pray, you will get a text message or a call. We have to hedge this time in and be vigilant about keeping it. Guard it. And discerning bad decisions is relatively easy. But actually, discerning the good things that aren't God things is a lot harder. So be vigilant. And then number 3, anticipate it. Put it in the diary, plan it, or it will not happen. And in secular psychology, and I thought this was really interesting, there are 7 different types of rest. So there's mental rest, spiritual, emotional, social, sensory, creative, and physical. And our Christian understanding of ourselves is holistic. You're not just a robot, you are mind and body and soul. So actually, when we think about our rest, we need to think about what we need. Like, where do you have a deficit which needs filling? Is it emotional? Is it physical? Is it creative? And maybe that means spending time with the people you love. Maybe that means going for a long walk. Maybe that means, running, baking, art galleries, trade museums. Get creative. Bring God into it. Watering the plants. And the final tip is to identify the lies. We live in an efficiency mindset. Rest can seem like weakness. If you feel guilty about taking a break or taking a day off, that you failed or you need permission somehow. Many of us, we struggle to rest out of perfectionism or a fear of failure. Or we think we need to somehow kind of earn the right. But that isn't what God is like. He isn't looking for miserable servants, but he's looking for sons and for daughters. And there are 7 types of rest, but spiritual rest, what psychologists call the ability to connect beyond the physical and mental and feel a deep sense of belonging, love, acceptance, and purpose. That is only found in God. And the world will tell us to get our sense of worth from what we do. But God has given us the Sabbath to rest from what we do. And in worship to the one who made us, to recenter ourselves in the one who made us. because we become what we worship. So are you tired or worn out or thirsty? Come to Jesus and let him give you rest. And I want to end by praying for us. Is that okay? So let's pray. So Jesus, we thank you. You say, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and let me give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. And Lord, we pray this morning that we would grow closer to you, who is gentle and humble in heart, who comes to teach us and give rest for our souls.